So, when you think of Nike, you probably think of a nice simple pair of everyday trainers. That might be about to change. I've just traveled all the way to Nike HQ in Oregon to go hands-on and feet in with 4 of the company's next-gen products. And using them, it's pretty clear that Nike's becoming a tech company. So the first product I tried is the most futuristic jacket I've ever seen, because there's a bunch of different materials that jackets can use to keep you warm. Like some of them use wool, some of them use feather, but Nike's next-gen jacket uses air. And the benefit of that is that you can now adjust your temperature on the go by just changing how much of that air is in the jacket, using this little pump that comes in the pocket. Let's do a live pump. And it's very immediate. And the interesting part of it is, while the air is coming in from one particular point, it's managed to flow to every nook and cranny of the jacket, like it's even in the collar, evenly across both sides. I feel like any more and we're about to recreate the movie Up. So you can think of this like an interconnected system of really tiny airbags on the inside that, when fully inflated, can keep you comfortable in temperatures 20 degrees cooler than when the jacket is deflated. The temperature difference is actually massive. Like, suddenly I feel hot in this quite cold room. So, like Nike often does, this thing's initially being released for professional athletes, and then it will trickle down for us mere mortals to buy. But I will almost definitely be doing that. Because to have one item of clothing that's going to take up almost zero space when it's deflated, that can keep you at your perfect temperature through day and night, is kind of like the dream thing to pack for a holiday. And then if you want to deflate it, whoa, that's almost immediate. So then we went to Nike's Sports Research Lab for Product 2. Essentially, 4,000 athletes a year come here to train and play sport, and while they do that, Nike is consensually spying on them. They're using the world's largest set of motion capture cameras combined with the world's largest set of force plates under the surface to essentially find out the stress points on the athletes' bodies so that Nike can build shoes that counter them. And there's some pretty cool outcomes from all this data. Like, they realize that grip in the forward direction is really useful because it means your feet stay planted as you're running and you preserve your momentum, but also that too much grip as you're rotating is associated with injury, which is why Nike's newer cleats now have these V-shaped studs, which are specifically for grip when you're sprinting forward on the fronts of your feet, but then these rounded ones at the back, which can release more easily when you stop and you want to pivot. Or, as part of this lab, they also take really detailed 3D scans of the athlete's feet, and by doing this enough times, they've figured out the subtle ways that feet are different between gender and ethnicity, which is why when you go to Japan, for example, if you buy the same shoe that is technically the same size, then for a lot of models, that shoe will still actually have a slightly different shape to the same one in the US. But then the other finding is that some people would benefit from a shoe that propels you forward. So this is Nike's Project Amplify, which they're calling the world's first powered footwear system. When it actually launches in most likely 2027, it will look like this. And so what I got to test is the latest working prototype, which looks a little simpler, let's say, but it is a super interesting glimpse into the potential future of footwear. So there's a few parts to this. There's the shoe, which importantly is actually a pretty great shoe without anything else added to it. I'm liking the fact that there's no laces. Whoa, they're really foamy. So then that shoe connects upwards to this arm, which is what contains the motor and all the processing power. Yes, processing power in your shoes. And then at the very top is the cuff, which totally doesn't sound like something you would wear when you're on a watch list. Also, though, really satisfying to loosen and tighten. And then you just start walking or running. You take 6 to 8 steps, and by the time you've done that, your shoes have used their processing power to figure out how you're walking, your stride, your gait, and then they start to lift your feet for you, giving you about a 20% increase in the total power of your legs.
And that's the last they saw of this sample.
You kind of feel the pulling force at the back of your foot, so your heel lifts up like that, and then you take the rest of the step by yourself. There's also an app where you can specify whether you want to walk or run or how you want that to feel, but you don't actually need to use it. The shoes figure it out by themselves.
So the moment you start running, it's initially heavier than usual. You can't run quite as fast. And then very quickly you can run a lot faster.
Now, there are some obvious questions. My first question when I look at that is, who is it for? It wouldn't be a fair gadget for an athlete to use. And then I actually like the idea when I go out to town that I'm just burning calories and I'm kind of doing a good thing for myself.
When I think about who it's for, we build a marathon shoe today that returns more metabolic effort to you than 10 years ago. People don't run less because of that. It actually, I think, unleashes the opposite.
It's a fair point. I mean, the way I see it, I think it's going to be a long time before the average user is going to want to start charging their shoes every morning. But there are 3 scenarios in which I could actually see it being useful now. These things mean that you can put in normal amounts of effort, but get to your location 20% faster. So if that extra 20% speed would be the difference between you choosing to walk somewhere and you hopping in an Uber, then I guess it would be an investment into your health. And the pace increase is real. I kept finding myself just ahead of the group that I was walking with without really realizing it was happening because I was just walking. And
Interesting thing I've noticed, everyone around me is panting. I'm not out of breath. Oh, whoa. So I'd say it probably perfectly counters the incline, the pretty steep incline of this hill. So I'm walking up, but with the same amount of effort as if it was flat ground.
And then third,
I run. My mum walks the dog around the block. Maybe we could jog together. There's some things that you've probably never been able to do that could be interesting.
someone who couldn't usually keep up with you suddenly being able to. And then what I think is really clever here is the battery, because it is custom designed so that it can just wrap around that cuff. That's super important because this is not a small battery. This is enough for 10 kilometers of powered walking or running. But by wrapping around your leg, it still keeps it, I would say, looking discreet, while also not adding an obvious weight to one side, which might stop pulling you in one direction. So I found this product not mind-blowing, since I have used a few similar exoskeleton-y things before and they've been about as effective, but still impressive in that this is the most low-profile, realistically usable everyday execution of the idea. Thankfully, there is a pair of shoes I tested that did blow me away. But before that, I got the chance to test product 3, Nike's next-gen sports clothing, which I was initially expecting to gloss over, but it's actually really interesting. So you might know that over the years, Nike has had a bunch of different lineups of clothing. They've had Dry Fit to keep athletes dry, they've had Thermofit to keep athletes warm, Storm Fit to keep athletes protected, and so the new one is AeroFit, and it's designed to fix a very specific problem. See, the world's getting hotter. Athletes are having to play physically demanding sports in often desert-like temperatures, so they're going to sweat a lot. The issue is, though, that the purpose of sweat is to cool your body down, but that cooling is only happening if the sweat is specifically evaporating off your body, not soaking into your clothes first. Nike actually has these insanely impressive but also super gross lab simulations of all this stuff, including dummy models that produce artificial sweat as they walk, and even an exercise bike in a hot room that actually has a pool of real human sweat on the floor. They're actually measuring how much liquid comes off of athletes that use the room, because the way they see it, every drop that hits the floor is a drop that isn't being evaporated off the skin and is therefore wasted. And the learnings from all of these very strange studies have been bottled together into AeroFit. So it's a new set of materials. It's stitched together in a looser way to let more air pass through the gaps in the fabric. But the thing that I find so interesting about it is the company has looked at athletes playing each sport separately in their labs. They've realized that air travels in a different way around the athlete depending on which sport they're playing, and then they've tweaked the stitching accordingly for each of these sets of clothes to make sure that the maximum possible air is guided across the body to get that sweat absorption from the skin. So for running, for example, the vast majority of the air is coming in straight from the front. So this middle area here is where most of the air is going to be allowed through the fabric. And then these dense meshes keep the air inside the cloth so that it travels around the sides of your body until it reaches the back, where it's then guided out. Kind of like an exhaust. With a sport like tennis, a lot of the air comes in from the sides, so that is where you find the larger perforations on the tennis top. And with weight training, your core is relatively still, with much more of the motion happening in the upper half. So that's where the training tops are designed to have max air intake.
Okay, I am aero-fitted. It just feels like a shirt right now, but I'm going to try and sprint in a straight line backwards and forwards to see if I can notice the way the air moves around me. Does this actually work? Oh, yeah, I'm actually a little bit chilly. Oh God. It's a bit like running topless, or at least what I would imagine that feels like, which is quite surprising considering how opaque the material actually is. I think the average person doesn't think of jerseys as an ever-evolving thing. You think surely by now we've been making them for 100 years, they're done.
That's right. The numbers that we got from the NSRL is that the air permeability is 238% more than our legacy dry fit.
And that's just the one that's being used now, the legacy one.
Correct.
Okay, so then we come to product 4. I sat down, I was introduced to the Nike Mind. My brain started flipping out at the possibilities of a mind-controlled device I was going to get to test, and then I was handed a shoe. But here's the thing, it kind of is one. So, as well as the traditional footwear departments that build shoes by looking mostly at your feet, Nike's also got this completely separate mind science department in the HQ, which has been working on this set of shoes by instead looking at your brain. And that journey has led them to these bumpy little things. So you've got the Mind 1, which is the slider version of this concept, and then the Mind 2, which is the sneaker version. And the best way that I can describe this to you is, you see all these little orange bubbles at the bottom? These are nodes. There's 22 of them, and each is positioned kind of like with acupressure at specific points in your feet that they've found trigger the biggest reaction from the brain. See, unlike the chassis of the shoe, which is firm, you can push these nodes in. And because there's only a very thin layer between the nodes and your feet, you can feel a sort of massaging effect every time you take a step. It kind of feels like I have a layer of bubble wrap beneath my feet. And as I raise and lower my heel, I can feel pop, 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 pop. But see, this isn't just acupressure. It's not just that you can push the nodes in, they can be pushed in any direction. And because your feet feel so connected to them, you can feel how they're being pushed, which is the weirdest thing because it means while you're wearing these shoes, you can feel the texture of the surface that you're on. It feels like the weirdest thing to say, but I can tell this is concrete. I tried them on a racing track, I tried them on AstroTurf, and you can actually feel the blades of grass. So I just found these addictive to wear. The massaging feeling, but also how being able to feel what you're walking on is quite grounding. And that makes complete sense with what Nike's trying to do, because have you ever tried meditating? If you have, you'll know that the first thing they often tell you to do is to direct your attention to the sounds around you, or focus on the surface you're sitting on. They do that because this kind of stuff brings your mind back to the present. And it kind of feels like these mind shoes are going for a very similar thing, to force you to mentally lock in. They're primarily designed for athletes to wear in the changing rooms, to make sure that they hit peak performance when they step onto the pitch. But I kind of like the idea of wearing them in my living room to make sure that I hit peak performance at, well, lunch. The only thing I would say is I found the effect kind of underwhelming on the sliders. It's much better on the sneakers, I guess because they stay in contact with your foot more consistently. So fun fact, I'm actually writing this video from a little cafe in Oregon, like 10 minutes from Nike's HQ. Amazing croissants, but God, look at this. I look at the Wi-Fi networks around here. All I've got is Tribute Guest and Tribute Public. Either way, I don't exactly feel very safe on them. Plus, all of my accounts are like, what the hell are you doing on the other side of the world? So they're all consistently asking me to verify myself, which I don't really want to be doing on who knows what kind of Wi-Fi. Thankfully though, Surfshark VPN, our sponsor, does actually know this. It's telling me this is an unsecure network. So I click this button. Surfshark is now going to route all of my traffic anonymously through the UK, which fixes both problems. It means that I can use this network, but with a lot more security. All my apps know that I haven't suddenly been hacked by some public tribute from the west coast of America. And I can also watch the Netflix shows I want without being harassed by the "this content is not available in your region" message. So go to surfshark.com/boss for 4 extra months of Surfshark for free.